The EFF says it has filed papers with the Western Cape High Court to challenge what it says was the unlawful and unconstitutional adoption of the 2025 fiscal framework and revenue proposals by Parliament last week. Let's get more on this now from the EFF spokesperson, Sinawo Thambo. Sinawo, a very good evening to you. Welcome to Full View on SABC. Talk to me about the basis for your case first.
Look, the basis is that we were in the Standing Committee of Finance on the 2nd of April 2025, where the Money Bills Amendment Act and Procedure and Other Related Matters Act was not followed to the letter and to the law. So what happened in that committee is that there were procedural errors that occurred in terms of making amendments to the committee report without making a clear statement as to whether we adopt or seek to amend the fiscal framework first, which is what the law demands of us. What then proceeded to happen is that that clear statement was inserted after the meeting had concluded without a clear report or vote by the committee as to whether we actually want to adopt the fiscal framework as it stands or we seek to amend it. So the insertion of that happened unprocedurally afterwards. It then went to Parliament without the committee agreeing on it and then was adopted by the National Assembly. So that entire process was constitutionally flawed and did not follow the legislation that guides the process itself. So that's why we're in court today.
So you had raised these very, shall we say, concerns during the bigger sitting where the Speaker of the National Assembly, Tokoti Diza, said that she had applied her mind and found that the proceedings or the adoption, in fact, of the fiscal framework should indeed proceed. In terms of consequences, what do you want the court to order if you are successful?
Look, we think that the Speaker made her determination first and foremost based on the advice of the people who manipulated this process in the first place. Because if you read her response to us in Parliament and listen to her there, she says she has been advised that everything happened accordingly. Now, our objection is that the very people who are advising you are the ones who conducted this meeting unprocedurally. So we constantly cautioned her she did not take our advice and we're in court. And we want the remedy from the court to be that the adoption of the fiscal framework by the National Assembly must be reversed and that report must be sent back to the Standing Committee on Finance so that it can be processed appropriately. And that will give us an opportunity as political parties to go through the correct procedure and hopefully save those political parties who have been duped and misled to think that a recommendation outside of an amendment of the fiscal framework can result in the reversal of the bed hikes 30 days afterwards. That is not permissible in law. So this will give us an opportunity to do a legislatively permissible amendment to the fiscal framework and save South African people from 0.5% bed hikes this year and 0.5% bed hikes next year as well.
Is the case that you brought, though, going to be heard before, for example, the value-added tax increase kicks in, because people have already started receiving messages from service providers, etc., saying this is what you'll be paying from May onwards?
Look, we've been advised by our legal counsel that the matter will be heard on the 22nd of April, which gives us an opportunity to reverse this process and still have time within the parliamentary process to go to the Standing Committee on Finance, make the necessary amendments to remove VAT increases as a provision, and then go back to the National Assembly, because during that period, we will be off the recess. So as things stand, Parliament is on recess. So we're going to have that time in that week before the 1st of May to make the necessary amendments should the courts decide in our favor on the 22nd of April 2025. And we are confident that they will do so, because this is one of the only mechanisms that we have as parliamentarians to rescue our people from regressive taxation, such as an increase in value-added tax.
So what happens then if the High Court orders or rules in your favour and, in fact, Parliament has to rerun that process, but the committee ultimately ends up at the same place where it says the report should go to the National Assembly for adoption? Will you accept that process if it gets there?
Look, if the process is conducted fairly and procedurally, there's nothing that we can do. Our qualm is that democracy was undercut and undermined, and the legislation of Parliament was undermined as well. So if things go according to the necessary procedure and political parties still remain firm, particularly the likes of Action SA, Build One South Africa and Rise Mzansi, who had gross misinterpretations of legislation and supported the fiscal framework with some delusion that they can amend it in 30 days. If they stick to those positions, even at that late stage, then there will be a reflection to the people of South Africa that this is not them having been misled, but a deliberate decision to support VAT increases, which will perpetuate increases in the cost of living for the poor and the middle class. So if that procedure is followed appropriately and we go to the National Assembly before from there, then we will have no justification to object to that process, but it must go through a correct procedure. And we now have another opportunity to rescue South Africans from the regressive bad hikes that are facing them. Those banks and retailers will have to subscribe to that court process if it comes to fruition.
The ANC is shopping around now for a reconfiguration of the government of national unity. I know you'd been approached at some point. That didn't get anywhere last year. Have you received a call now? And would you join, given that, like the DA, you are going to court on a very similar issue around the processes of Parliament in adopting the fiscal framework?
The Economic Freedom Fighters does not have any political obligation to support the fiscal framework and revenue proposal that we were not part and parcel of drafting or contributing to. So the ANC, if it has any problems or wants to fight with anyone, it must fight with its coalition partner, the DA. But as the Economic Freedom Fighters, we have no obligation to support that fiscal framework. So we are playing our role as an opposition party. And I was listening to Fiscal Mbalula earlier on speaking about the fact that they approached us to abstain and tactically we could have done so. That is the mind of someone who imagines us to be in politics for self-interest and some trade-offs for cabinet positions, because his suggestion is that we should have abstained from voting against the VAT hike in order for us to be some sort of option at a later stage to be included in the GNU. The EFF is not an opportunistic organization. We're going to stick to the principles that we have subscribed to. We're against the VAT hikes, and we owe no one any obligation to vote for VAT hikes in exchange for cabinet
But are you
positions.
still open, Sinawo? I'm pressing you a bit because we are almost out of time. Are you still open to a conversation with the ANC now that it says it's reopening the door and casting its net open, wide open, in fact, to reconfigure the GNU? Will you take a call? Will the EFF take a meeting with the ANC on that score?
Absolutely. The EFF is open to that. So the fiscal framework process and revenue proposal process has passed. Now we're going to the Division of Revenue and Appropriations Bill process. The EFF is still open for engagement. We still have proposals, and we're willing to join the GNU on the conditions we've always said. The DA and the FF Plus must be out, and this process should be a lesson to the ANC of the white supremacy and arrogance that they've subjected themselves to. And if they can self-correct, the EFF is available to assist in governing South Africa. And there's no crisis. The sky will not fall because the DA has left government.
Sinawo Thambo, good to talk to you. Sinawo is the spokesperson for the Economic Freedom Fighters. Confirmation tonight that they too, like the DA did last week, will be going to court on procedural grounds to challenge the processes that led up to the adoption of the fiscal framework last week by members of Parliament.